The marble floors of Sterling Industries gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart through the executive hallway. It was 3 in the morning, and the 42nd floor was supposed to be empty. Marcus had been working as a janitor at this building for 7 years, invisible to the powerful executives who walked these halls during the day. Tonight, however, would change everything. Tonight, the words he would whisper to the CEO would shatter her world and transform his own life in ways he could never imagine. This is the story of how a single dad janitor whispered your brother has set a trap, and what happened next shocked everyone. Marcus was 43 years old, with calloused hands that told the story of a man who had worked hard every day of his life. His daughter Emma was 12, and the brightest light in his dark world. She had her mother's eyes, deep brown and full of wonder, though her mother had passed away 4 years ago from cancer. Since then, it had been just Marcus and Emma against the world. He worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, but the night janitor position at Sterling Industries was his main source of income. The pay wasn't much, just enough to cover their small apartment rent and Emma's school supplies, but it was steady work. Every night, he would tuck Emma into bed at their neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, then take the bus across town to clean the offices of people who made more money in a day than he made in a year. He didn't mind the work itself. There was something peaceful about the empty offices at night, something honest about making things clean and orderly. What he did mind was being invisible, being treated like he didn't exist when executives passed him in the hallways during his occasional day shifts. But being invisible had its advantages too. People talked freely around him, as if he were just another piece of furniture. They shared secrets, made deals, and revealed their true selves, never knowing that the quiet man pushing the mop was listening to every word. It was on a Thursday night when everything began to unravel. Marcus was cleaning the conference room on the executive floor when he heard voices coming from the CEO's office. This was unusual because Victoria Sterling, the CEO and owner of Sterling Industries, rarely stayed this late. She was known for her strict schedule, arriving at 6 in the morning and leaving by 7 in the evening. But tonight, her office light was on, and Marcus could hear her voice through the slightly open door. She was on a video call, discussing the company's upcoming merger with a Japanese firm. The deal would secure thousands of jobs and save several factories from closing. Marcus had read about it in the company newsletter, feeling relieved that his job would be safe for years to come. As he continued mopping, trying not to make noise, he heard another voice, this one coming from the office next door. It belonged to Daniel Sterling, Victoria's younger brother and the company's chief financial officer. Daniel was talking on his phone, and his words made Marcus freeze in place. "Everything is set for tomorrow," Daniel said, his voice cold and calculating. "The documents are forged perfectly. When Victoria signs them thinking they're the merger papers, she'll actually be signing over her shares to the shell company I've created. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll have control of everything. 20 years I've waited in her shadow, and tomorrow it all changes." Marcus's heart began racing as he listened to Daniel outline his plan in detail. The fake lawyers who would present the documents, the distraction he had planned to keep Victoria from reading the fine print, the offshore accounts where the money would be transferred. It was elaborate, carefully planned, and utterly ruthless. Marcus knew he had to do something, but what could a janitor do against someone as powerful as Daniel Sterling? He thought about going to security, but Daniel controlled that department. He thought about calling the police, but what evidence did he have except his word against a billionaire's? As he stood there in the dark hallway, paralyzed by indecision, he thought about Emma. What would she want him to do? She always talked about doing the right thing, about being brave, even when you're scared. She had been brave when her mother was dying, holding her hand and singing songs even though her little heart was breaking. If his 12-year-old daughter could be that brave, surely he could find the courage to speak up. The next morning, Marcus did something he had never done. In 7 years of working at Sterling Industries, instead of leaving when his shift ended at 6, he stayed. He hid in a supply closet on the executive floor, waiting and watching. At 8:30, he saw Victoria Sterling arrive, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor as she walked to her office. At 9, he saw Daniel arrive with 2 men in expensive suits, carrying briefcases. They looked like lawyers, but Marcus knew better. He watched them enter the conference room, and a few minutes later, Victoria's assistant came to get her, saying the lawyers for the merger had arrived. This was it. This was the moment. Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of Emma's face, and stepped out of the supply closet. Victoria Sterling was not a woman who was easily surprised. At 38, she had built Sterling Industries from a small family business into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. She had faced hostile takeovers, economic crashes, and corporate espionage. She thought she had seen it all. But when the janitor appeared in the hallway and whispered urgently that she needed to speak with him, she was genuinely taken aback. Her first instinct was to call security, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was a desperation there, but also a determination that she recognized. It was the look of someone who had everything to lose, but was willing to risk it anyway. "I'm about to go into a very important meeting," she said coldly, her hand on the conference room door. "Whatever this is about, it can wait." That's when Marcus whispered the words that would change everything. "Your brother has set a trap. Those aren't real lawyers in there. The papers they want you to sign will steal your company." Victoria's hand froze on the door handle. She turned to look at him fully for the first time, really seeing him. His uniform was clean but worn, his face lined with exhaustion, his hands trembling slightly. "That's a very serious accusation," she said quietly. "Do you have any proof?" Marcus shook his head. "Only what I heard last night." He was on the phone, planning everything. The shell company, the forged documents, the fake lawyers. "Please, Ms. Sterling, just read every word before you sign anything. Check their credentials. Call your personal lawyer. Don't let him do this to you." For a long moment, Victoria studied his face. She had built her empire by reading people, by knowing when someone was lying to her. This man, this janitor, whose name she didn't even know, was telling the truth. Victoria made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone watching. She trusted the janitor. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus Chen," he replied, surprised by the question. "Mr. Chen, I want you to go to my office and wait there. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone except me. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded, confused but willing to follow her lead. Victoria watched him go, then took out her phone and made a call to her personal lawyer, speaking quietly and urgently. After that, she called her head of security, not the department Daniel controlled, but her personal bodyguard, who had been with her for 15 years. Finally, she straightened her jacket, put on her poker face, and walked into the conference room. Daniel was sitting at the table with the 2 fake lawyers, all smiles and false warmth. "Victoria, finally, we were starting to worry. These gentlemen have come a long way to finalize the merger." Victoria sat down slowly, her eyes never leaving her brother's face. "Have they? How thoughtful of them. Gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to see your credentials. It's just a formality, you understand." She saw the flicker of panic in Daniel's eyes, quickly hidden. The fake lawyers fumbled with their briefcases, producing documents that looked official but would crumble under scrutiny. Victoria pretended to examine them, all while her real lawyer and security team were racing to the building. "Everything seems to be in order," she said smoothly. "Now, let me read through these papers carefully. This merger is too important to rush." For the next 30 minutes, she went through the documents line by line, her brother growing more agitated with each passing moment. She could see it all now, the clever forgeries, the hidden clauses, the trap he had set so carefully. When her phone buzzed with a message from her real lawyer confirming he had arrived with the police, She finally looked up at her brother. "Daniel," she said softly, "how long have you been planning this?" The color drained from his face as he realized she knew. The fake lawyer started to stand, but the conference room door opened, and police officers entered, followed by Victoria's real legal team. "You couldn't just be happy with what you had," Victoria continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Vice President, a fortune of your own, a brother's love. It wasn't enough." Daniel's mask finally cracked completely. "Your brother's love," he snarled. "I've lived my entire life in your shadow. Dad left you everything, the company, the properties, even the family home. I got nothing but a position under you, always under you. I deserved more." As the police led Daniel and his accomplices away, Victoria stood alone in the conference room, the weight of her brother's betrayal crushing her chest. She had lost her only family, the person she had trusted most in the world. Her legs felt weak, and she needed to sit down, but first, she had a promise to keep. She walked to her office where Marcus Chen was waiting, looking terrified and out of place among the expensive furniture and priceless art. When she entered, he jumped to his feet. "They arrested him," she said simply. "You saved my company, Mr. Chen. You saved everything I've worked for." Marcus shook his head. "I just did what was right. Anyone would have done the same." Victoria laughed, but it was a sad sound. "No, Mr. Chen, they wouldn't have. Most people would have looked the other way, kept their heads down, protected themselves. You risked your job, possibly your safety, to warn someone who has never even acknowledged your existence. I don't even know how to begin thanking you." That evening, Victoria Sterling did something she had never done before. She invited her janitor to dinner, not to a fancy restaurant where he would feel uncomfortable, but to a small diner he suggested near his neighborhood. There, over coffee and pie, she learned about Marcus Chen's life. She learned about Emma, about his wife's death, about the 3 jobs he worked to keep them afloat. She learned about the nights he went hungry so Emma could eat, about the shoes held together with duct tape because Emma needed new ones for school, about the dreams he had given up to be a father. And Marcus learned about Victoria too, about the father who had pitted his children against each other, always comparing, always criticizing, about the loneliness of success when you have no one to share it with, about the weight of responsibility for thousands of employees and their families. They talked until the diner closed, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt invisible. The next day, Victoria called Marcus into her office again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Emma was with him, having been picked up from school by Victoria's driver. The young girl's eyes were wide with wonder at the fancy office, but she held her father's hand tightly, unsure why they were there. "Emma," Victoria said, kneeling down to the girl's level, "your father is a hero. He saved my company and many people's jobs. Heroes deserve rewards." She stood and handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was a check that made his hands shake. It was more money than he had ever seen, enough to pay for Emma's college, to buy a house, to never worry about money again. But Victoria wasn't done. "I also want to offer you a job," she said, "not as a janitor, but as my personal assistant. The pay is 6 figures, full benefits, and flexible hours, so you can be there for Emma. What do you say?" Marcus couldn't speak. He looked down at Emma, who was beaming up at him with pride and love. All he could do was nod, tears streaming down his face. But the story doesn't end there. Over the following months, Marcus proved to be an invaluable assistant. His attention to detail, honed by years of cleaning, made him excellent at organizing Victoria's schedule. His ability to read people, developed from years of being invisible, helped him protect her from those who would take advantage, and his integrity, the same quality that had made him speak up that morning, made him the only person Victoria trusted completely. Emma flourished too. With her father's new job came stability and opportunity. She joined the science club at school, took piano lessons, and for the first time since her mother's death, she saw her father smile regularly. Victoria, who had never had children, found herself drawn to the bright, curious girl. She started mentoring Emma, teaching her about business and leadership, but also learning from her about joy and wonder and the simple pleasure of ice cream on a sunny day. A year after that fateful morning, Victoria made Marcus a partner in the company. It was unprecedented, a janitor becoming a partner in a billion-dollar corporation. But Victoria didn't care about precedent. She cared about loyalty, integrity, and the courage to do what's right. The media had a field day with the story, but Victoria and Marcus weathered it together. Two people who had found an unexpected friendship in the most unlikely circumstances. Daniel Sterling was sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. During his trial, it came out that he had been planning the betrayal for over 5 years, carefully placing his people in key positions, slowly undermining his sister's authority. The only thing he hadn't counted on was a janitor who refused to be invisible when it mattered most. In his prison cell, Daniel had plenty of time to think about where things went wrong. He had been so careful, so meticulous in his planning, but he had forgotten that buildings aren't just made of marble and steel. They're made of people. All kinds of people, from the executives in the boardroom to the janitors in the hallways. And sometimes, the most important person in the building is the one you never notice. Marcus often thought about that night when he overheard Daniel's plan. He thought about how close he had come to walking away, to minding his own business. He thought about what would have happened if he had been too scared to speak up. Victoria would have lost everything. Thousands of people would have lost their jobs. And Daniel would have destroyed the company out of spite and greed. But mostly, he thought about Emma and what he had taught her through his actions. That doing the right thing isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. That one person can make a difference, even if they're just a janitor. That being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. The Sterling Industries building still gleams in the city skyline, but it's different now. The executive floor isn't quite as removed from the rest of the building. The CEO knows the names of all her employees, from the mailroom to the boardroom, and there's a new motto etched in gold in the lobby. Integrity is not about position, it's about action. Every morning, Marcus Chen arrives at the building in a suit instead of a uniform. He takes the executive elevator instead of the service elevator. He sits in board meetings instead of cleaning them up afterward. But he never forgets where he came from. He makes sure the janitors have good wages and benefits. He ensures that every employee, regardless of their position, has a voice. And sometimes, late at night, he walks through the empty hallways and remembers the man he used to be, pushing a cart and listening to secrets. Emma is in high school now, at the top of her class, with dreams of becoming a doctor. She tells everyone the story of how her father saved a company by having the courage to speak up. She wears her father's old janitor name tag on her backpack, a reminder that heroes come in all forms. Victoria never married or had children of her own, but she found a family in Marcus and Emma. They have dinner together every Sunday, not in fancy restaurants, but in the same diner where she and Marcus first really talked. She's teaching Emma about business, while Emma teaches her about TikTok and whatever music teenagers are listening to these days. It's an odd family, formed by circumstance and choice rather than blood, but it's real and it's theirs. The truth is, Victoria Sterling could have ignored Marcus that morning. She could have dismissed him as a disgruntled employee trying to cause trouble. She could have walked into that conference room and signed those papers, losing everything she had built. But she didn't. She listened to a whisper from someone the world had taught her to ignore, and Marcus could have stayed silent. He could have protected himself and his job, could have chosen the safe path of invisibility, but he didn't. He chose to speak up, to risk everything for someone who had never even known his name. That's the real shock of this story. Not that a brother would betray his sister for money and power, because greed and jealousy are as old as time. The shock is that in a world that teaches us to look out for ourselves, to mind our own business, to stay in our lanes, two people from completely different worlds chose to trust each other. A CEO trusted a janitor with her empire. A janitor trusted a CEO with his truth. And in that trust, they both found something they had been missing. Marcus found respect and opportunity. Victoria found loyalty and family. The conference room where Daniel's trap was almost sprung has been converted into an employee break room. Marcus insisted on it, saying that the space needed to be redeemed, turned from a place of betrayal into a place of community. Victoria agreed, and now it's where employees from every level of the company eat lunch together, sharing stories and ideas. On the wall hangs a simple plaque that reads, "In memory of the day a janitor saved a company, and a CEO saved a family." 5 years have passed since that morning when Marcus Chen whispered his warning. The story has become legend in the business world, studied in ethics classes and management seminars. But for Marcus and Victoria, it's not about legacy or lessons. It's about the simple truth that every person matters, every voice deserves to be heard, and sometimes the most important words are whispered by someone the world has taught us not to see. Emma is applying to colleges now, with recommendation letters from some of the most powerful people in business. But the letter she's most proud of is from Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who watched her all those nights when her father was cleaning offices. In it, Mrs. Rodriguez writes about the man who worked 3 jobs but never missed a school play, who was tired but never too tired to help with homework, who was invisible to the world but always visible to his daughter. Marcus has been offered positions at other companies, huge salaries, and impressive titles, but he stays at Sterling Industries, not out of obligation, but out of choice. This is where he found his voice, where he learned his worth, where he built his family. And Victoria, once known as the ice queen of the business world, has become something different. She's still brilliant and driven, but she's also warm and approachable. She knows that true strength isn't about standing above others, but about lifting others up. The last scene of this story takes place on a quiet Tuesday morning. Marcus is in his office, preparing Victoria's schedule for the week. Emma is at school, about to give a presentation on modern heroes, where she'll talk about her father. Victoria is in her office, looking at a photo on her desk of the 3 of them at Emma's high school graduation. And somewhere in a prison cell, Daniel Sterling is writing a letter he'll never send, apologizing for the trap he set and the brother he chose to be. But this story isn't really about Daniel and his trap. It's about Marcus Chen, who refused to be invisible when it mattered most. It's about Victoria Sterling, who chose to listen when it would have been easier not to. It's about Emma Chen, who gave her father the courage to speak up just by being herself. It's about all the invisible people in all the buildings around the world, cleaning and maintaining and keeping things running, who have voices that deserve to be heard. And it's about the truth that shocked everyone, that sometimes the most powerful person in the building isn't the CEO in the corner office, but the single dad janitor who whispered, "Your brother has set a trap." Today, if you visit Sterling Industries, you might see Marcus Chen in his office on the executive floor. You might see Victoria Sterling walking through the building, greeting every employee by name. You might see Emma Chen during her internship, learning the business from the ground up. But what you'll definitely see, if you look closely, is a company that was transformed by a whisper, a warning, and the courage of 2 people who chose to see each other as human beings rather than titles. The marble floors still gleam, but now they reflect more than just light. They reflect the truth that every person in that building, from the CEO to the newest janitor, matters. They reflect the lesson that integrity has nothing to do with position and everything to do with action. And they reflect the shocking reality that a single dad janitor named Marcus Chen didn't just whisper a warning that saved a company. He started a revolution of recognition, where invisible people became visible. where whispers became roars, and where the most shocking thing of all was how simple it was to do the right thing. This is the story of how a single dad janitor whispered, "Your brother has set a trap," and what happened next didn't just shock the CEO, it shocked the world, challenged the system, and proved that heroes don't always wear capes or suits. Sometimes they wear janitor uniforms, push cleaning carts, and have the courage to speak truth to power when everyone else would have stayed silent.